It's Wednesday, December 23rd. I'm Lucy Steiner.
And I'm Sam Cedar. Which of these stories will you be talking about today?
Senior United States military officials are increasingly nervous about what sort of orders Donald Trump might give in his final days in power. For example, the words martial law have been used inside the Oval Office. Meanwhile, it's another first as Joe Biden names Miguel Cardona as his Secretary of Education. But he's already reneging on promises about how quickly he'll address the atrocities committed by our immigration system under Trump. And lastly, prosecutors in Pennsylvania have at long last uncovered a clear-cut case of voter fraud in the November election. And of course, it's a Trump supporter who did it.
You are listening to Majority FM's AM Quickie, and these are the stories you need to know.
CNN reports that with less than 30 days to go before Joe Biden's inauguration, there is growing anxiety about what Donald Trump might do in his final days in power. Will he invade Iran? Will he declare martial law and use some bogus emergency to stay in power? The scenarios are troubling enough that military leaders have gone so far as to say they will not play a role in deciding an American election. CNN spoke to nearly a dozen currently serving officers, and the conversations were all unsettlingly similar. Concerns have been rising since Trump fired Defense Secretary Mark Esper last month and replaced him with Acting Secretary Chris Miller. He then installed political loyalists in key civilian positions. One officer said people are making lists of everything they can think of that Trump might do. Several worry there could be a round of firings or forced resignations of more top officers. That sounds bad, but as always, it gets worse. Last Friday night, the idea of using the military to change the election outcome reached directly into the Oval Office. Trump hosted a raucous meeting that included lawyer Sidney Powell and her client, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, where the idea of declaring martial law to overturn the election came up. Several military officials told CNN that for the remainder of his term, if Trump issues any orders, the key will be whether or not they're determined to be legal. We're guessing a self-interested declaration of martial law would be illegal, and people would resign rather than carry out those orders, but CNN isn't totally clear on that point, so fingers crossed. Alex Padilla, California's Secretary of State, was chosen yesterday by Governor Gavin Newsom to fill Vice President-elect Kamala Harris's seat in the U.S. Senate. The Los Angeles Times says the appointment tears down a barrier that has stood as long as California's statehood, as Padilla becomes the first Latino to represent the state in the Senate. Also yesterday, the New York Times reported that Biden plans to name Miguel Cardona, Connecticut's education commissioner, to serve as his education secretary. This means, pending confirmation, a Latino will be the nation's highest education policymaker. But it's not all warm fuzzies from the Biden campaign for Latinos. Top Biden advisors said yesterday they will not immediately roll back asylum restrictions at the Mexican border and other Trump immigration policies, the Washington Post reports. In short, the transition team is walking back some very important promises about what Biden will do on day one. Speaking to reporters on a conference call, several members of the Biden transition team said that the incoming administration will need time to undo the damage to the U.S. immigration system. The press call came a day after Biden advisors Susan Rice and Jake Sullivan told the Spanish-language news agency, EFE, that it would take months to restore asylum processing at the border. Kenji Kazuka, a senior researcher and policy analyst with Human Rights First, told the Post that migrants in Mexico are struggling to make a living and protect themselves in high-crime border cities. Human Rights First has tracked at least 1,300 acts of violence against migrants in Mexico, including murder. Kazuka said there needs to be some sense of urgency from the Biden administration. He added, quote, "It can't all happen on day one, but it also shouldn't wait until June," unquote. Hey, we found the voter fraud. And it takes a page from Psycho. Prosecutors say a Pennsylvania man admitted to illegally casting a ballot in the general election for Donald Trump as his dead mother, HuffPost reports. The man also allegedly registered his dead mother-in-law to vote with the intent to do the same. Bruce Bartman, 70, has been charged with 2 counts of perjury and 1 count of unlawful voting. For this, he is facing up to 19 years in prison. He allegedly went online and registered both deceased women to vote as Republicans in the November 3rd election, using either their driver's license or social security number. Delaware County District Attorney Jack Stolzheimer said Bartman admitted to detectives that he did this to further the Trump campaign. Bartman's ballot for his mother, who died in 2008, was successfully counted in the election, HuffPost reports. Bartman, a registered Republican, also successfully submitted a ballot in his own name. Though Bartman successfully registered his mother-in-law to vote, despite her dying in 2019, he never requested a ballot for her. Bartman's lawyer, Samuel Stratton, said his client is taking responsibility for his actions and is cooperating with authorities. Stretton said that in his political frustration, Bartman, quote, chose to do something stupid, and for that he is very sorry, unquote. Stolzheimer said they're not prosecuting the case because of who Bartman voted for, HuffPost reports. The county's top prosecutor also stressed that Bartman's ability to cast a vote on behalf of his deceased mother is not evidence of widespread voter fraud. And of course it's not. But it is rich that after all of Trump's bluster about voter fraud, it's one of his supporters who catches charges.
And now, for some quicker quickies.
Quicker Quickie.
This is the deadliest year in U.S. history, due mainly to the coronavirus pandemic, the Associated Press reports. Preliminary numbers suggest that the U.S. is on track to see more than 3.2 million deaths this year, or at least 400,000 more than in 2019. Congress overwhelmingly passed a $900 billion stimulus package yesterday. Hundreds of dollars in direct payments may start going to American households as soon as next week, according to the New York Times. Who wants to be a hundredaire? Donald Trump's longtime banker at Deutsche Bank, who arranged for the German lender to make hundreds of millions of dollars of loans to his company, is stepping down from the bank, the Times reports. Rosemary Vrablic, a managing director and senior banker in Deutsche Bank's wealth management division, recently handed in her resignation, though it's unclear exactly why. Best of luck to her and her future endeavors. The Justice Department is suing Walmart, alleging that the nation's largest retailer knowingly filed thousands of problematic prescriptions that contributed to the opioid crisis, the Washington Post reports. The DOJ is seeking civil penalties that could total billions of dollars. Between 2006 and 2012, Walmart ordered 5.5 billion oxycodone or hydrocodone pills, which, sounds like much more than enough.
Quicker Quickie.
That's all for the AM Quickie today. Join us this afternoon for the last episode of the Majority Report in the supremely exhausting year of 2020.